Okay, well, I think we should get started. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us so early at the beginning of your day. We're really glad to have so many people tuning in right now. My name is Sarah Hayden, and I am a graduating senior at the University of Texas, and I've been working with Movability for the past year, which is crazy. But I've gotten to collaborate with the Movability team on lots of projects while at this job. But I was especially excited to get to help with this survey and the analysis, just because none of our initiatives have felt quite as timely or urgent right now as this, just given the severity of all the disruption to work life that we've experienced due to COVID-19. So over the past 3 weeks, I've worked with Melinda Villagran at the Texas State University, who is on the line to help present today, to compile and analyze the results of this survey. And I am so excited that we get to share them with you guys today. Before we get started, just a little bit about Movability. Movability is Central Texas's Transportation Management Association. So we work with employers and commuters to help them reach their goals with mobility planning. We do this by offering customized commute planning services, network opportunities, and introductions to partner members. And we also work closely with our lead partner members, the City of Austin, Capital Metro, the Downtown Austin Alliance, and the CTRMA. Movability's goal is to help people in Central Texas get around, and right now this looks a lot different than normal. So we started this project to try to gain some insight as to how we can help the region best move forward as we gradually think about going back to work. With that, I'm really glad to pass it on to Tim Hayden, who's a member of the Movability Board of Directors and President and Managing Partner of Brain & Trust Partners. But first, I think we have a poll that's going to pop up. So if you guys could take just a second to give some input real fast before we get started with the presentation. I think we're going to give just a couple more seconds and then we're going to close the poll. So if you haven't already, go ahead and select an answer for us. Okay, great. There we go. I think I will let Tim take it away for now. We want to get started.
All right. Echoing Sarah, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. As Sarah said, I think everyone at Movability is really excited about this is the second study we have done with our partners at Texas State University and their translation health program down there. Really thankful for Melinda joining me today. And without any more pageantry, let's dive right in and share some of the insights we have from this most recent study on telework. First of all, is just kind of let you know about the sample size. We had just north of 730 folks respond to us. And right off the bat, I think we were impressed by the fact that almost 98% of them were working from home when they took this study, when they participated in this survey. But even more impressive than that was the fact that 63% of these folks are doing so for the first time. I want you to keep that in mind as we go through some of the other insights today. But some of the other things we'll get into is basically where people live and obviously where they work, because we do find that commute distance has an effect on how people are really comfortable or wanting to continue with telework. Whoa, pardon me. Of the respondents that we had a nice sampling from across industries. No surprise, here in Austin, Texas, we probably over-indexed a little bit with city, state, and county government employees. When you think about our business cores, including the Central Business District, what we still consider the Central Business District in downtown, the majority of folks that work in these areas do work for some type of government agency, University of Texas, Travis County, City of Austin, and obviously the state agencies. But if you look across everything else, we do feel as if we've got a nice sample that represents just about every industry that is here in Austin. And you know, given the sample size and given the timing and how fast we wanted to turn this study out, we feel pretty good about this being representative of the various studies, or pardon me, various industries that have been affected by COVID-19 and had to deal with or capitalize on the opportunity to telework or work from home.
Hey, Tim.
Go for it.
Hi, this is Melinda Villagran from Texas State University. I just wanted to say we were really excited to be part of this project, in part because we really believe in translational health research that commuting behaviors have a significant impact on health over the course of your life. And so we were interested in learning more about that, but also because this is such a unique sample. It represents all of the various organizations in Austin who participated, but it also represents a huge number of zip codes and the entire footprint of the Austin workforce. And so you're going to see, I think in the next slide, that it is one thing to talk about Austin in terms of people who live in Austin, but it's another way to talk about Austin in terms of the people who commute to Austin, especially in the time of COVID-19. And so regarding the sample, it's an add-on. Back in the winter, I was fortunate to work with Movability on a previous survey, and we were looking at commuter behavior. And so it just seemed obvious when commuter behavior had a rapid shift overnight due to self-distancing that we would want to try to capture those changes. And so this survey was a natural extension of the original project. The average age of the participant was 44 years old, but that is not to say that most people were 44. In fact, the range of ages represented in the sample, which was actually very robust, it was from 18 to 80. So a wide variety of ages were participating in the study as well.
Thank you, Melinda. And to that point, we did in the study have 103 unique home zip codes. This is where people live. Over there to the right, you can see the top zip codes. And you know, again, you can see that we, as Melinda just said, we had a wonderful representation of people who lived at every corner of town, which we think makes this data very telling. Now, where people work, obviously, I had said this before, the majority of respondents did commute to this central part of town, or what we still consider, I guess we can't call it the central part of town anymore, but downtown and the downtown area. But still, we had respondents who were working in other parts of town, up around the Domain, a little bit further north than that, perhaps. Anything you want to add to that, Melinda?
Sure. Again, just the idea that the vast majority of the study, participants were working in that downtown area, but they were coming from over 100 zip codes, which tells you a little bit about the commuter patterns and the potential for telework to reduce, you know, the impact of people coming and going across the entire Central Texas region for work.
And in good times, it explains why Mopac looks like what it does.
Exactly.
So really fascinating to understand that half of our participants commute more than 20 miles round trip. And that's a Texas thing, isn't it? I mean, when we think about our major metropolitan areas, lots of folks that live in the suburbs and commute in one direction to get to work are doing so at a relatively great distance. Here you can see that we did have a representation of folks that were not commuting as far, those that are going less than a mile, only 4%, but a good representation of distances and where people live, where they work, understanding their usual round trip. It was important in framing what the effect and what the future may look like for teleworking at this time.
Right. I think if you could just keep that figure at the bottom in mind, that 1/3 of participants travel more than 15 miles each way, that's 30 miles round trip, because there were some really significant findings with that group. When you think about the change in their day-to-day routine, given the fact that they spend a tremendous amount of time in their commuting life, that went away. And so those people in that group, I think, were really interesting as we go through the slides moving forward in terms of the way that they use that time that was given back to them, that they weren't sitting in, the Mopac traffic snarl.
And again, we had mentioned this before, but oh my goodness. There we go. Nearly 2/3 of the respondents had never worked from home before the pandemic. And I want to be clear on this. I think there are a number of respondents that, myself included, because I did participate in the study, that am guilty of after dinner, bringing my laptop to the couch and banging out some email to catch up. This is very different. This is we were very specific. Melinda can back me up on this, but we were very specific that what we were looking at here was the actual, not really home office, but reporting to duty at home, not leaving home during the work hours, in terms of working from home or teleworking. Anything you want to share about the data here, Melinda?
Sure. I mean, the internet and cell phones are ever present, and so we're all teleworkers in some way, but this was a little bit different. This was talking about days per week that you had given up working in your organization's location and transferred that work to your home. And so there's a real shift in terms of the way that people did that, and certainly in the amount of time spent teleworking.
And Melinda, share with us a little bit about the key findings here.
Absolutely. So I to be honest, I really was expecting to see a lot of angst among participants who might be struggling with a shift from their regular routine to a telework situation. And the big picture from this study is that angst was less important to teleworkers than some of the benefits that they were able to reap as a result of telework. So the first thing is that obviously when you have a long commute and you're spending, a tremendous amount of time on the bus or in a car or however you're getting to work, oftentimes that is not something that's going to improve your health. But when this sample of participants shifted to telework, they said that they were experiencing better mental health, better physical health, and more use of bicycles for exercising, which I thought was significant because I'm sure many of you, like I have gone to the park with my family, and I've never seen so many people at the park. I try to social distance while we're walking and go at odd hours and things, but just down the street from me in our little community park, I look out the window and I see more people riding bikes, more people jogging. And so that shift has perhaps happened in part due to the extra time that people have. And the interesting part about this, if you want to go to the next slide, Tim, is that working from home, increased physical and mental health, feeling better, was not taking away from productivity. In fact, this study found overwhelmingly 80% or more of the samples said they had no loss in productivity. This slide says, in general, do you feel more productive when working from home? So it's asking them in a general sense about their productivity, but there were several items that sort of tapped on this, and in every case, people were reporting that while they were getting out and walking, while they were getting out and riding their bicycles and spending time and feeling more healthy, they were also more productive. And they were actually, in some cases, spending more time working on an hourly basis. And so the whole shift, when you think about what it takes to commute to work, it's not actually just the time in your commuting, car or whatever. It's the whole process of getting ready and getting there and then shifting in the afternoon to get home. Well, that time and effort was shifted to two things. One, productivity in the workplace. So they were working longer and they were working harder, but they were also able to carve out time to take part in some of the activities that led them to feel more mentally and physically healthy.
Well, and go ahead and continue with that, Melinda, because I think explain the different view we have here.
Sure. So there was, I want to talk about the bottom end of the scale. A little over 1 in 4 participants said that they had somewhat of a negative or very negative impact to their productivity. And I looked further into this group, and by and large, this was the group that was struggling with the technology that they needed to be productive at home. And so I think this is an important time for, as businesses start to rethink how they're going to move forward, to take stock of what their workforce actually needs to work from home and make sure that that is ready to go. Because when people struggled with productivity, it was most often predicted by a lack of hardware or software that they needed to be able to work from home. And when that was the case, I think there was some frustration. But luckily, the vast majority of the sample had what they needed. And so they therefore were able to continue working from home in a very productive way.
Well, and Melinda, real quick, a question on that. When you say you looked a little closer at that 24%, or the 27% there at the bottom end of the scale, do we know if it was a majority or say half of our respondents also had children? Because I think what we're looking at is we're right at 2 months and a week or two into this quarantining, or the lockdown, as people call it. And a great number of us, at least that I know in my neighborhood, we have to balance not just the productivity, which is expected of us as employees, as workers, but also we've got to do everything to be a tech support analyst for an 8-year-old who's got coursework. It's an added layer that could affect that negative impact, and but could be also very impressive when we look at the other end of the spectrum.
Absolutely. So I don't want to overstate the people that had struggles with productivity, because it was not the picture of this particular sample. The sample was overwhelmingly more productive, and they were very interested in productivity and time spent at work. And I can only imagine that will go up when you don't have children at home. I have children that are taking AP tests at the same time that I'm doing a webinar, and I'm always, sort of worried about the connectivity issues, because a family of 4 working at home is really a struggle, especially when they get stuck on the computer and mom, So I think that parents with children at home might actually even be more productive over time when children are returning to school. That only makes sense. I also saw a recent study. It was an academic study, but it was talking about how in the workforce, there had been a reduction in our case, the number of journal submissions for academic journals during this time. And they attributed that to the fact that children were at home. And so perhaps it is the case that as children begin to return to schools, that parents will have even more opportunity to structure their days in ways that will be both productive and healthy as teleworkers.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key point here is that with, you know, as we're saying here, when you're looking at improved physical and mental health, you know, the disposition that workers will have, that parents will have, that employees will have, there is that belief that they'll have a stronger desire or confidence, if you will, in teleworking, in working from home. And to that last point you made, the perseverance to figure it out, whether it is that they've got a balanced time with roommates or family, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of folks that have been, as this abruptly happened to all of us, they've been forced into an experiment, and it's just been fascinating to see how they've gone about making it work. And to your point, all the confidence in the world that there's an opportunity for them to make it work even more so if kids go back to school for a few days a week at least.
Right. So I appreciate the fact that Movability, when these samples are collected, has a very strong interest in the confidentiality of the participants and making sure that it's non-identified information. And so we do often limit the number of questions and the types of questions that we ask. So I wish that we would have asked about if the participants had children and those kinds of things, but we try to keep it as minimal as possible to encourage people to participate. And I think that's in part why 732 people actually did take part in the study, which is great. So I think maybe in the future we could check into that to see if the family life situation has a role.
Let's talk about that hardware and software you mentioned earlier.
Sure, yeah. So I was really surprised by this as well. I guess in my mind, you know, the stereotype or the worst case scenario is that you have a bunch of Luddites at home that can't work because they don't know how to turn on their computer. And obviously, I mean, this is Austin, it's not the case. But still, I think you have sort of these nagging concerns about whether people are going to be able to access the hardware and software that they need to do their jobs. And overwhelmingly, respondents were able to access hardware, usually laptop computers, even cell phones, modems, routers, etc. And they were also able to access software that they needed. I know at a university, we often change software. You know, we have a system for something, and then we get a different system, and then we get a different system. And so as companies change their hardware and software, I think it's really important at this moment to take note of those things that were essential among their workforce. So maybe just doing, you know, an informal check with people, what they used, what they needed, and making sure that those things are ready. And then even having things like go bags that have everything that can be deployed in a moment's notice if there's a need for telework situations. The other thing I think about this hardware and software issue is the third piece to this is a space where you can get away and work. And as telework might be integrated in a more regular way into people's lives, I think that that's an opportunity is for people to develop that, to make sure they have the hardware, the software, and the space where they can have, you know, some kind of a place where it's quiet to do a webinar or to focus on work. And that can happen, you know, as people get a sense whether or not they're going to continue to be able to telework.
Exactly. And I think just as we're doing this morning, I think the other side of that, when you talk about a space, you know, there's the hardware, there's the software, there's a space, there's the connectivity, what we need to be able to maintain some of the interpersonal relationships, some of the face-to-face conversations that we need. A lot of us need that to do business, to be productive. But I don't think I was kind of interesting for me to see that Microsoft Teams was as popular as it is. because we seem to see Zoom in the news all the time. But no doubt about it, this is part of what is changing everything. And just as we see more people in the parks and on the roads on their bicycles, I've seen a lot of Grande Communications and Spectrum trucks in the neighborhood who are probably upgrading people's bandwidth. Anything on this that you want to share, Melinda?
No, just a personal request that organizations not only think about what they want to use, but think about what the people that they want to talk to online use. I can tell you honestly that I have been in a meeting on every single one of those video conferencing platforms within the last week.
Right.
And so sometimes it's not just a matter of making sure that I know when the meeting is and what it's about, but also which platform. And so understanding the platform that's going to work for your organization, but making sure that you're on the platform that your customers or your colleagues use so that there's some consistency, that would be really great.
Absolutely. This is the fun part for me. Melinda, let's talk a little bit about physical health and mental health.
Sure, absolutely. So as Tim mentioned, Texas State is very focused on applied research that seeks to move findings that can improve people's health and healthcare from our campus out into the community and the workforce. We're very interested in building programs and participating with collaborators to find ways to improve health in Central Texas. And certainly I think commuting is something that we've been focused on up until this point. And so when you jump into these relationships and you have these ideas about maybe this is something, you don't ever really know, but I can say for sure that what we have determined is exactly what we suspected, that there are some net challenges to health related to commuting. And when this sample was given the opportunity to telework, they experienced tremendous changes in terms of physical and mental health. And so when you feel better, physically and mentally, perhaps that is, in our case, it was associated with productivity, but I think in many cases, it could be a strong predictor of increased productivity over time. It could also certainly relate to issues of the cost of insurance and the amount of time people are away from the job over time. So having this huge finding related to the physical and mental health of the workforce, I think if you really think about that in terms of not just what it is today in this snapshot, where we're talking about a pandemic, and we're talking about poor physical health and risk associated with that causes strain to mental health, people were still saying that they feel better and that they think that they are more physically and mentally healthy in this telework setting. So again, just like taking away the potential issue of having kids at home, taking away the potential issue of a pandemic looming, just the sheer fact that you have a teleworkforce that is continuing could have really tremendous benefits in the social determinants of health that we think of all the time, and have an impact ultimately on productivity as a relationship with the health of the workforce.
Definitely. Let's take a look at just walking, for instance. I mean, to your point, I live in the Brentwood neighborhood here in Austin, which is statistically the center of Austin population-wise, and no doubt about it, I've seen many more people out walking. I went for a 3.5 mile run this morning, which is not something that I did on the regular when I was commuting downtown, to prove your point. I'm not walking as much because I don't walk to the train and then walk from the train station to my office downtown the way I used to. So I'm actually walking less, but I found more time to run. Share with us a little bit about the data here on walking.
Sure. So I thought this was interesting because obviously the results suggest that people are as likely or more likely slightly to walk in this telework situation. I think that there's an opportunity in terms of the 40% who are walking less my guess would be these are the people that walked in relationship to their commute, or they have walk groups at work that walk at lunch, etc. And so from an HR standpoint, I think there's a real opportunity to target this group if an organization is going to continue with telework practices even 1 to 3 days a week, because this group could have some adverse health effects over time. And if there's some targeted ways to build in, motivation, incentives, webinars, whatever HR uses to reach out to the organizational members to talk about ways to integrate walking into your telework day and things like that, to make sure that this group that had this shift reduction to walking less can be moved back into the fold to walk more during telework.
Exactly. And biking, same thing. I just a point, I working out in my yard. It's the other thing too, is just not something we talked about here in the study, but everybody's yards sure are pretty right now. It's springtime, but people are spending more time doing things to beautify, plant gardens, whatever else. But when I've been in the front yard, I've just noticed anecdotally more people riding their bicycles. And I just saw in Austonia, a new publication from Rich Oppel and some other folks here in town. Austonia had talked to some bike shops and said that April bike sales were the highest they had been in I believe 2 or 3 years. Share with us a little bit, just as you did with walking, what's going on with people on their bikes, Melinda?
Sure. So this pattern looks a little bit different from the walkers. There wasn't actually a significant difference between walking and biking changes, but within biking and within walking, I think there were some interesting, significant differences. With this group, I see that bikers are hardcore. They were biking at the same amount whether or not they're commuting, and I suspect that that is a habit that's been formed. And so as they form these habits, I again would hope to move people that are biking less, I would suspect might have been biking in relationship to their telecommute, to their commute, excuse me. But if, they could be teleworking over time, I think they could shift their pattern and begin biking more as well. But this is, again, an opportunity to target health promotion kinds of literature and programming from an HR standpoint.
Certainly. So in general, the changes to work routines with social distancing and COVID-19, there have been some significant changes in physical activity among participants, as you just said, Melinda. The tea leaves are telling us early that there is an opportunity to reinforce that behavior, possibly and to do that in terms of commuting as much as it is for exercise. If people have a willingness now to walk further distances. I've often said that one of the biggest challenges that Cap Metro has had with getting people on buses or on trains or in using shared micromobility services like scooters back when we had car-to-go on the streets. One of the biggest challenges was that you had to walk sometimes as far as a mile to get to one of these vehicles. To get to the bus stop sometimes. That's not the case, and Cap Metro does a fine job of making sure you don't have to walk that far. But the behavior that's changing here, I think, is very encouraging for how people will continue to telework, and or if they start to commute even just a few days a week, they may find new paths to the office, and as you've already stated, to be in a better frame of mind from a mental health standpoint and certainly from a physical health standpoint.
Absolutely.
So as we just said, and I talked about being encouraged about the future here, with 3/4 of the participants saying they would like to continue teleworking after the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. I think that's very impressive, because we literally just started this. We just did this 2 months ago. This is new, but as I guess labeled it earlier, it's a forced experiment. Melinda, what do you think we have to look forward to? And notwithstanding a second wave of cases or hotspots that pop up with COVID-19, what do we have to look forward to here in terms of the disposition and the willingness of people to work from home?
Right. Well, I think this is an overwhelming result, given what we've already said about the adversity of having, multiple people in the house, maybe not having a designated space for everybody to do their work, trying to figure out hardware, trying to figure out software, trying to change a routine. I know, there's many people that have been in the same commuting routine for decades, and this was a jolt to the system. So given the forced experiment nature of this shift, and given the rapid speed in which it occurred, it is quite remarkable to me that 64% of the workforce said that they would prefer to telework in the future. And a vast majority said either 1, 2, or 3 days, which if you were a cynic, you'd say, well, maybe, people are saying, yeah, I want to telework because maybe they're not working. But we know that's not the case, because we know that productivity was reported to be significantly greater. So it's a really, really positive opportunity for commuting. It's a positive opportunity for organizations who have made an investment in this telework experiment. There's a tremendous amount of effort that has gone into making this possible. It would just be a shame to throw it out the window and expect to sort of go back to the way things were, because I don't think that's possible.
Right. And I think that's the key message, though. There's not a normal to get back to. And with the way behaviors changed, whether this learned, and again, I'll say it again, this forced experiment and learning that we've just gone through, and many of us are still going through to figure this out. There's no doubt about it. Things are going to look very different going forward. And here at Movability, we have worked with a number of our members, major employers in Central Texas over the past 2 or 3 years to do just this ahead of COVID-19, to be able to talk about what it's like to allow employees to work from home, to empower them or give them the option to work from home 1 to 2 days a week. I think we're going to see a rise of interest and a willingness from employers to want to embrace that for all the reasons we were doing it before, to get cars off the road and make traffic a little bit more manageable for everyone else, but also now to do so in the name of productivity. I think it's fantastic.
Definitely. And I just want to say one thing about that. The vast majority of the sample did not want to telework 5 days a week. They still recognize the importance of that human connection that you make in the workplace. They just wanted to have some balance between the two.
That's right. And here in this summary, I think we said most of it on the slide before, but anything you'd like to talk about that desire to continue teleworking that we haven't already, Melinda?
I think, as a researcher, I always want to put caveats on things. And these associations among physical health, mental health, productivity, time spent at work, reduction in time spent commuting, these are all very important, not only in this snapshot during COVID-19, but over the course of the lives of employees, and also in terms of just a million things that happen in social determinants of health, in the way that we, eat, in the way that we exercise, in the way that we frame our lives and frame our relationships. And so, over time, I think it would be interesting to follow this group and see if they are able to telework moving forward, and then to see what impact that has. But I suspect that the findings would be equally or even more positive, but it will be an experiment that will continue.
Absolutely. And in conclusion, Melinda, you want to wrap us up here?
I'm just incredibly encouraged by this group of participants who has shared their telework experience with Movability, and I'm really grateful to be part of this project. And so I don't know if there were questions in the chat, but if you end up having questions about the sample itself or about the study design, etc., I would be happy to answer those offline. My email is M as in Mary, V as in Victor 12 @ TXSTATE, and we'll put that in the information. But no, I just think this is a really good first step and a very interesting and robust sample that reflects not only the city of Austin, not only Travis County, but the footprint of the workforce of Austin. And that's really important.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. Want to say we are going to put up one more poll. I think some people had trouble last time. It might pop up as a separate window, so be on the lookout for that. We're going to try to get that up and give you guys a minute to vote on that and type in any questions that you have, and we will answer those.
And as you're taking that quick poll, just want to remind everybody that at Movability, this is our bag. This is what we do at Movability in helping employers come up with new programs, new plans, and tactical ways to help employees be productive when it comes to commuting, when it comes to transportation. And as I said a couple of times during the sharing of the insights today, we've been doing this for years. We've been helping companies come up with telework strategies, with hybrid models, as Melinda shared there in the closing. There's no doubt that a lot of people are going to feel very comfortable being productive from home. In fact, are going to want to be able to work from home, and telework, as we're calling it. They're going to want to do that probably 2 to 3 times a day. There's a symphony of ways that you can manage that. And if you're not a Movability member, we certainly encourage you to become one and learn more about ways that we may be able to work with your organization to help you manage telework and your commuting opportunities.
And I'm going to go ahead and close that poll now. And if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type those in and we'll get those answered for you. I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions here. A couple of questions about wanting to know more from the employer's perspective. So we heard a lot about the employee's perspective on productivity and activity and mental health. Can you all speak to what that means for the ROI from the employer's perspective?
Absolutely. It's okay, Tim. I think
Go for it.
Obviously this sample was focused on employees, not employers. A similar survey could certainly be done to ask employers about productivity and deployment of hardware and software, et cetera. I think the answer is that in this particular study, we sampled people as employees, and so that was the focus of the questions, but the implications are obvious for the employers in terms of thinking about if it's possible to integrate a telework strategy into your organization moving forward, what that would look like in terms of managing, in terms of retention, in terms of workforce satisfaction, because it's sort of telling that people have enjoyed this overall. And I really believe that it might actually impact their willingness and desire to work in the office 5 days a week moving forward. And so with that knowledge, I think the organizations have done an amazing job in this jolt of telework happening and working from home really, really quickly. But over time, I think there's going to have to be some restructuring if you want to continue working and allowing people to work at home from 1 to 3 days, to not only allow that, but to support that in ways that you would have traditionally done with a workforce that was in one location.
Great, okay. And then we have a question that says, not seeing the tremendous benefits on mental health in the results of that question. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Again, caveat, we are asking people about their self-reported mental health in a time of COVID-19. And so it would be very interesting to tease out the sources of those changes. But that said, the overall positive impact is something I think that organizations could use as a way to, think about how people are approaching their jobs, how they're enjoying their jobs, and whether that is something that plays into their productivity. Because I know that when I'm doing something that I love, I'm much more likely to do it for longer and do it more often. And so if that's the case, then any fears about telework could be relieved, because you know that people are feeling better and they're therefore going to be perhaps more productive as a result.
Excellent, thank you. And then we have time for one last question here. How are employers deciding when and how to safely bring staff back to the office, even if it is on a limited basis? Tim and Melinda, do you want to really quickly touch on how teleworking could maybe help employers who might be thinking about spreading employees out or rotating and hoteling?
Sure. I mean, I think it all depends on a number of variables right now. No two employers are going to be looking at the same opportunities or the same challenges, but to the way you just asked that question, Kate, no doubt about it, telework is going to be a needed ingredient, a critical ingredient to weaving, your workforce into operations that slowly start to return back to the office, and being able to do so in a way that balances the expectations of those who do show up to the office. Back to the previous question about mental health, I would say there are probably a few people who answered their mental health is better just because they don't have to sit on MoPac for 45 minutes in the morning and 45 minutes at night. And I'm probably being generous when it's only 45 minutes, but there's going to be a bit of a dance here for an organization to understand how you balance people coming back to the office, and to the point about it being safe, how you have open areas, how you have common areas, depending on the building that you're in and what the parking structure is like. There are all kinds of different things to take into consideration about those common areas where many people and a large number of people would be passing through spaces. And I know that you can work with building management in some situations. I know that there's general guidance you can give to folks to use hand sanitizer, to wash their hands, to wear masks in common areas. I don't think that there's going to be an easy prescription for any company or all companies to have the same prescription for returning back to having folks on site, and then balancing that with teleworkers as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tim and Melinda, and thank you to everyone who asked some excellent questions and logged in. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Movability. As Tim mentioned, this is what we do. So if you are an employer trying to figure out how teleworking might be part of your plans moving forward, we are happy to help. And you can find us at movabilitytx.org. I hope everyone has a wonderful Tuesday. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful Tuesday.
Thank you.